Hi. In this video, I'm going to be talking about study one of my dissertation. To do so, I'll give some background information on my project, and I'll then introduce the methods and results of this study one. Cognitive hope is the most prolific type of hope studied in social psychology. It was developed through hope theory by Snyder, and it describes an individual-oriented, motivational, goal-directed state. Cognitive hope includes agency, the will or willpower, as well as pathways, the ways in way power. Cognitive hope is measured with items like I've been pretty successful in life and I meet the goals I set for myself. I can think of many ways to get the things in life that are most important to me. And even when others get discouraged, I know I can find a way to solve the problem. Cognitive hope creates a feedback loop such that individuals who are high in agency are more likely to develop a variety of pathways to meet their goals. Individuals who are more likely to develop a variety of pathways to meet their goals are then more likely to achieve those goals. And in turn, individuals who are more likely to have met their goals view themselves as an individual who's high in agency. Now, because cognitive hope creates this feedback loop of goal attainment, cognitive hope has been found to be related to a variety of different factors across social psychology. Cognitive hope predicts things like self-interested goal motivation and goal attainment behavior, mental health, physical health, and life satisfaction. But cognitive hope also predicts things like social relationships, purpose in life, social integration, and holding social roles that one views as meaningful. Furthermore, previous research has identified that cognitive hope is related to prosocial behavior, engagement with social movements, compassion, moral concern, and social contribution. What we can see from these examples is that cognitive hope predicts not only individual-oriented outcomes, but also other-oriented outcomes. But this is interesting because we know that cognitive hope is an individual-oriented conceptualization of hope. So researchers have wondered why cognitive hope also predicts these other-oriented outcomes. Even though cognitive hope is related to both individual-oriented outcomes and other-oriented outcomes, we can think about classical and historical thinkers to think about how hope has been discussed beyond this cognitive conceptualization. Throughout history, hope has been viewed as morally and socially important by a variety of thinkers. To give a few examples, Augustine of Hippo describes that hope was valuable in part because it's connected to the future well-being of the collective. The future well-being that involves those beyond solely the self. He specifically talks about this as something that happens through faith. Immanuel Kant views hope as distinct from belief, specifically as morally important and related to pursuing the highest or ultimate good. Viktor Frankl wrote about hope as part of living with integrity, avoiding despair, and avoiding action paralysis, even amidst his great suffering. But when we think about cognitive hope and the items used to measure cognitive hope, they likely wouldn't fully capture the kinds of hope that are discussed by these classical and theological thinkers. So, items like I've been pretty successful in life and I can think of many ways to get the things in life that are most important to me likely wouldn't fully capture the kind of hope that I previously mentioned. But recently, social psychology has developed a type of hope that does capture this kind of other-oriented hope described by these previous thinkers. Virtuous hope is described as a virtue that promotes the common good. And virtuous hope does have a cognitive component that aligns with hope theory, that aligns with cognitive hope, but virtuous hope is distinct from cognitive hope. Specifically, virtuous hope recognizes the strategies and sacrifices needed to meet a communal or other-oriented goal. It has a behavioral and effective motivational value that aligns this kind of hope with a virtue framework. Specifically, this is through three components: a cognitive component, such that virtuous hope describes a purposeful vision that is strong and lasting in adversity, but also an effective motivational and behavioral component, such that virtuous hope is oriented for the common good and is done so while encouraging others beyond the self. Virtuous hope is measured with items like I stay hopeful when I face hardship, I encourage others to keep pushing ahead, I focus my thoughts on how my goals will help others, and my vision for the future keeps me going. So, my overall hypotheses are oriented across this range of social psychological outcomes that range in individual orientation versus other orientation. For outcomes that are individual oriented, I expect that cognitive hope will be a stronger predictor than virtuous hope. However, when it comes to measures that are other oriented, I expect these to be predicted by virtuous hope over and above cognitive hope. So that's what I explored here in this first study of my dissertation. I explored one aspect of prosocial behavior with the hypothesis that it would be better predicted by virtuous hope over and above cognitive hope. The specific type of prosocial behavior that I chose to explore was environmental prosociality. And environmental prosociality is measured across three specific subdomains: the private sphere, the public sphere, and policy sphere. So, beyond simply measuring virtuous hope and cognitive hope, I measured a variety of dependent variables across these three spheres. Specifically, I measured behavioral intentions, activism, private policy support, public policy support, personal efficacy, personal response efficacy, collective efficacy, and collective response efficacy. Beyond these, I also measured a variety of additional variables, including optimism, social support, empathetic efficacy, religiosity, consideration of future and immediate consequences, financial threat, climate emotions, attitudes of consumers, and sustainable food consumption behavior. Furthermore, I included some exploratory items on immigration, including immigration attitudes and immigration beliefs, as well as identification with the world and identification with Americans. I also included a single item measure of moral expansiveness. I collected this data online on the survey data collection platform of Prolific, and as you can see here, I had a representation of both men and women and a wide set of ages. Furthermore, I had roughly equal representation of Democrats, Republicans, and independents in this sample. First, I'll showcase the results of environmental prosociality as a single factor because I found that combining all of these measures into a single factor had high internal consistency. First, you can see here from this table that pathways, agency, and virtuous hope were all significant individual predictors of environmental prosociality. In fact, a hierarchical regression showcased that, yes, pathways and agency are both significant predictors of environmental prosociality, but once virtuous hope is added to the model, pathways and agency are no longer significant predictors of environmental prosociality. Furthermore, when considering a variety of additional variables that I explored in this project, virtuous hope remains a significant predictor even when considering the roles of social support, consideration of future and immediate consequences, financial threat, and empathetic efficacy. Notably, consideration of future consequences is also a significant predictor. When looking at the individual roles of cognitive hope in each of these individual outcome measures, agency and pathways were both significant predictors of a variety of outcomes, including activism, personal efficacy, personal response efficacy, collective efficacy, and collective response efficacy, but neither agency nor pathways was a significant predictor of behavioral intentions, private policy support, or public policy support. Virtuous hope, on the other hand, was a significant predictor of all of the measured outcome variables within this study. Let's look at some standardized regression results for each of these different outcome measures within environmental prosociality. Behavioral intentions was significantly predicted by virtuous hope, but not agency, pathways, or optimism. The same is true for personal efficacy. Private policy support. When it comes to public policy support, both virtuous hope and agency are significant predictors, but pathways and optimism are not. Activism was significantly predicted by virtuous hope, agency, and optimism, but not pathways. Personal response efficacy beliefs were predicted by virtuous hope and optimism, but not agency or pathways. The same is true for collective efficacy and collective response efficacy. Overall, these results show that virtuous hope is a unique predictor of environmental prosociality over and above cognitive hope. Future directions, particularly in my dissertation package, is to explore the comparative roles of cognitive hope and virtuous hope across social psychological outcomes. Specifically, in my dissertation, I aim to explore a variety of outcomes that range in their orientation. So, I will be measuring outcomes that are individual oriented, other oriented, and some outcomes that fall in the middle of this range. Things like purpose in life, social relationships, and social support.